Ladies, on March 27th at the Golden Gate Club in San Francisco, I invite you to join a room of trailblazers, executives, entrepreneurs, and visionaries who are rewriting the rules of money. Hear from real women who've built wealth through real estate investments, scaling businesses, and creative financial strategies. And learn from industry leaders who have walked the path you're on and who are ready to share their playbooks. You'll engage in intimate panels, fireside conversations, and curated peer-to-peer matchmaking designed to spark meaningful connections. Leave with our wealth creation toolkit packed with actionable resources to help you prioritize your goals and take immediate steps towards financial independence. Now, your journey doesn't end when the day is over. Each of you will be invited to join our online Catalyst community, where you'll be guided through more educational opportunities and times to be able to connect with each other over the course of the next few months. Wealth creation is about opportunity and community. Now, early bird tickets are $9.99 through February 27th. Don't wait. This is your moment to build confidence, community, and wealth. Apply now at women.win and use the code SHAMA25, that's SYAMA25, to get a 25% discount off the early bird price. The Women in Wealth Catalyst Summit, ladies. It's time to redefine wealth and redefine your future.
Welcome to Getting Rich Together, the show for successful women who are looking to take their financial futures to the next level. I'm your host, Shama Bunton. When I started my wealth building journey, nobody knocked on my door to give me all the answers. So I want to talk to the experts who've done it and bring the answers to you so we can discover the right opportunities that will help us achieve the financial futures we've always dreamed of together and have fun doing it. So let's dive into this episode and start getting rich together.
I am here today with the incredible Sam McLemore. Sam, you are a complete champion of women getting rich together, being able to build and have successful lives. I remember I was having a conversation with William Green and he was like, you need to meet Sam. She is just gonna blow your world. And I was like, yes, an incredible female who is out there doing all the hard work and building a prolific career in life. I am so excited to have you here today on Getting Rich Together. Thank you for being here.
Shama, I am excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So let's start from the juicy beginning. Sam, you weren't always this prolific investor who was out here making waves in the world. I imagine you were once a little girl, and maybe a little girl who wore pigtails, maybe not, but you were definitely between the ages of 8 and 12 years old at some point in this life. I would love for you to take us back to a young Sam. Where was she living? What was she doing? What was family like? And most importantly, what were some of the early money stories that you were starting to see?
Yeah, it's so funny. I grew up in Vermont, a very small town, and my parents were at like the opposite ends of extremes when it came to money. My dad was a saver, spend nothing, so thrifty. And my mom was spend it now, live large. One of my earliest memories was being in a JCPenney with my mom, and she was hiding this JCPenney card. And I'm like, I'm that annoying child. What are you doing, Mom? What's going on? I'm like figuring it out. Like, don't tell your father. But we didn't have much money. So money was always a big, important thing in the house. Dad didn't want us spending any of it. They divorced they separated when I was 10. So then it was, my mom on her own. And, I started working pretty young. I mostly worked every day at 12 to have my own spending money. So money was a big topic for me growing up, and not one I think that was, it was one that I had to think about and pay attention to.
And so your very first job was what? What was young Sam at 12 years old making money doing?
She was babysitting every day after school. I would there were some friends, they had a couple of kids. I would watch their kids after school. I think I may have cost them more money than, because I'd eat all their snacks and watch their kids, but I'd save my $2 an hour. I'd save my $2 an hour and go to the movies or, buy a new outfit. But I was spending time working from 12 years old.
I love that. I think also when parents separate young, all of a sudden
financial differences become even more highlighted. I'm sure it was really interesting to see, wow, like this is really how things now operate in two homes that are operating probably very differently. Did you notice stark differences as you would sort of be with mom, be with dad, and how they were managing money?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I mostly was with mom and lived with mom, and mom got into some, I remember having significant anxiety around money. Mom at one point when I was in high school, had challenges around, can we pay the mortgage? And I remember that was probably my first experience with anxiety and that feeling of like, is everything going to be okay? So I committed to myself. That was probably a pretty pivotal moment in my life, because I remember promising myself, I will never be dependent on anyone for money. Like, I will make sure I never feel like this again. So that certainly was, and then dad was investing, he was saving, he was trying to get me more involved with markets, which was a very slow process, but I guess ultimately successful. I saw him make money in the tech bubble of the late 90s, with some proceeds of an insurance fund that I had. And then he got out at the right time. And then over the years, I saw, wow, actually, there's something going on here.
Wow. So how old were you when your father first introduced you to this crazy thing called the stock market?
I remember I was probably maybe around 15, 16 when he started to think about investing in the stock market with some of these insurance proceeds. He wanted to know if I was okay with him buying Dell computer, and that was a great investment. But I was like, yeah, dad, whatever you want. I was like, sure, I trust you. I didn't really think about it. And then it did really well. And then I was in college and those funds helped pay for my college. And then he paid close attention to the markets. The tech bubble burst. And at some point he's like, should we sell? Should we get out? I'm like, yeah, dad, whatever you think. And I was like, not, what I trusted him. I was like, whatever you think. He got out at the right time. But through that experience, so I saw, it make money. I saw him get out. And then I took some investments classes. So during that, period, I was like, this is interesting. What's going on? I need to learn a lot more about this.
And also, what a really just incredible experience to have as a young person, to be able to both have some capital to do something with, and then have your father be doing it with you and sort of taking you on the journey. Should we do this? Shouldn't we do this? Or how do we start to think about these things? That's a very unique and incredible position. And then also combined with, let's call it some fear and scarcity around never wanting to go without. I can see how all these components are coming together to create this really prolific entrepreneur. It's very, it's very incredible.
Yeah. And I was 8 years old and bit by this dog. And so that's what led to these insurance proceeds. So for us, my parents had then put it away and said, this is your college fund. I mean, we didn't have a lot of money. So the stakes were really large. Again, my dad knew that. He understood. I hadn't internalized that yet. But, I think he wanted my okay in case something went wrong, which it can always go wrong, right? So I was very lucky to, it was definitely formative and a lot of different things going on. And so it kind of put me on, a path.
I love that. And so at university, was it like, ding, 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 I'm going into finance? Or had you explored other majors? Like, what was going on in your young, early adult life?
No. So I grew up in Vermont. I didn't come from a lot of money. I went to school at Washington and Lee in Virginia, Southern school, very well-to-do students there. I thought I was going to major in chemistry because I'd done very well in chemistry in high school. I had my first semester of chemistry for majors and quickly realized this is not what I want to do in my life. It was hard. It was the hardest B I've ever gotten, I think, to that point. And so then I started thinking, okay, now what am I going to do? I knew I was analytical. I was good at math. I was good at science. There was a business school there. And I remember looking over there and saying, you couldn't really take classes there till your sophomore year. But I was like, that's analytical. That's interesting. Let me take some classes in the business school. And so once I did that, I was pretty good at the classes and I liked them. So that's really what got me more interested in business.
Cool. And so coming out of university and starting to figure out where to go next, what were the next steps? How did you even think about, capitalizing your life? How did you pay for things at this young age? Where's your head at?
Yeah, it's funny because I always knew that I needed to get a job that made money. Because again, I knew I didn't have a safety net of support. I knew I was supporting myself. I remember when my mom was going through financial problems and I knew how much she made a week. And I thought, if I can ever make $1,000 a week, that's $52,000 a year. I'll have it made. I'll be great. And I ended up majoring in accounting and business. And I knew the starting salaries, and the starting salaries were, within that range. And I was like, and accounting, you could easily get a job. They needed, accounting. There was a high job security. So that was important to me. So, and investment banking was a big, they had a big recruitment at my school. And that's where a lot of people went. You can make even more money there. So I was trying to get into investment banking after an accounting internship. And then I just won the job lottery because Bill Miller was a great value investor, one of the best in the world at that time. He was, I guess, 11 years into his 15-year streak beating the S&P 500. So he beat it for 15 consecutive years. No manager has ever done that. So I was in an investments class. Our investments professor was obsessed with Bill. And he was like, no one's ever done this. He's a genius. He's a god. And they finally got him to come back the fall of my senior year. I was in an investment club. So I met him, asked him if I could send him my resume. I'd been in an investments club and class at that point, and I knew I kind of liked investments and I was interested in it. I thought it was impossible to get a job in investments. That's what everyone said out of college. But I met Bill and interviewed with him and, came to Baltimore and interviewed with the whole firm and got a job offer. So I ended up joining him as a junior analyst right out of college in equity investment.
Hell yeah. Look at you. It's like sometimes we say things like we're lucky, but ultimately I think it's all really divine timing. And there is no luck in the fact that you were in university, in the investment club, having had these experiences, having this sort of inner drive, which it sounds like at that young point is, I need to be successful to take care of myself and willing to sort of do what you need to do to create the life that you want. And so, Sam, it's no surprise. So you go to Baltimore. Now, obviously, this is an incredible opportunity. So I'm imagining you weren't like negotiating your salary when you first got there. But tell me, what was it like sort of during your tenure there? How did things start to progress? When did you start to really say, okay, this is how I'm going to start investing my money more thoughtfully as a young woman?
Yeah, that's a great question. I didn't negotiate my first salary. I had a couple of other offers. One was at the same firm in the investment banking department. And so they kind of just matched what the other offers were. So that's how that started. And I started saving and investing right away. And the work I was doing was on stocks. I was always interested in that. So I like to put some of my own money into, the markets and, the stocks that I was picking. So that was a great way to learn more about what I was doing. And my thought was always, this has just been my approach, and it makes it much easier to kind of, I think, lower the stress around it. Like any money I'm putting away is money that I'm not going to need until, I was always thinking like a long time, retirement. So that makes it easier if you don't need that money in the next year, in the next 5 years. So I did a lot of, individual stocks that I was interested in, that I was doing research on in my brokerage account. I mean, I didn't have a ton of money to do in this, but I would do whatever I could.
You had enough to be dangerous to yourself.
Probably not for me. It was a lot for me. And I was, active.
That's incredible. And so, during the beginning phases of sort of building out your own unique points of view and how you started thinking about things and playing with things and building, as these years are progressing, how are you starting to look at what is shaping your personal life? So obviously you're starting to earn more, which means you can start to invest in yourself in other ways outside of the stock market, possibly home ownership or just life changes. How is life starting to evolve in parallel as you're building this incredible career?
So I bought my first house, I guess, a year after I graduated from college. And
Says nobody, Sam.
Actually, more people said it, because if you remember, that was right very, very early on in the housing bubble, and the credit standards had deteriorated so much they would give anyone a mortgage. You didn't need a credit score. You didn't need a lot of money. I got in right at the perfect time on one of these loans that got these banks in trouble, but they certainly helped me. It was like no money down, because they would finance the whole thing, 2 mortgages, like very little money down. And it worked out great for me because I did pay my mortgage every month, unlike some people who got these loans. But it helped me build equity, and you pay a little bit off, you pay more off over time. The housing market prices went up for another number of years before they turned around, and I ended up selling and moving and buying a different house in 2007. But that, I was fortunate to get in the early part of that period when housing prices were still going up, because that did help me build some equity. And then I was always, again, I had grown up with not a lot of money, and I had grown up earning money, saving it, spending it. So even during college, I would work during the summers and save money that would be my spending money for the rest of the year. My parents were not helping me with like spending money during the year. So this habit of budgeting, saving, like being disciplined around spending. I remember in college, again, my friends had, parents that made a lot more money. I remember going on a shopping trip to Tyson's Corner in Washington, D.C. with a couple of my friends, and they had credit cards, and I could buy nothing. And I remember that was like a very depressing experience in college. So it felt, I associate money with freedom and security. And so once I had my own job and I could do that more, I could actually buy, the nice sweater. Now, I didn't do a lot of that because I've always had this constraint and value thing and the need to rein in what I was spending. But I would certainly say there was a trend over time to feeling more free, I would say, with money as I was saving more.
At what point, like how old were you when you felt secure?
It's a funny question, because I would say I'm certainly at a point now, like I am 100% financially secure, but I'm still pretty disciplined about like spending. And that habit, I think once you have it, it doesn't just leave you. So I watch, tightly, not as tightly. I remember for a long time, I would strictly budget what I was going to spend on X line item. So I don't do that anymore, but I'm a value investor. So I like to buy things for less than they're worth. So I love a good deal. I'm always looking for a good deal, whether it's on a vacation or a stock or, an outfit. That gets me excited. Oh, I get a great bargain. That'll make me excited to spend. But outside of that, I get a lot of fulfillment and satisfaction out of saving. Of
course. Well, what I think is so interesting is, you're building this career in investing, and then at some point you decide to buy a Vermont Inn, and all of a sudden it feels like this more entrepreneurial sort of streak comes out, which is how can I sort of create other things in the world? So talk to me a little bit about, obviously increased levels of risk, and sort of saying, okay, I now feel ready to make this move, and this is different. And up until this point, I don't believe you had a career in hospitality. So tell me a little bit about sort of the dominoes that fell, and then from a personal financial standpoint, what gave you the confidence to be able to say, okay, I'm going to do this and play with this and see what's possible?
Yeah, it's interesting because that was the intersection of a number of different things going on in my life. One, I did always have an entrepreneurial interest, and I was always exploring, different ideas of businesses. So I always had that. And then, that was 2011. So that was right after the financial crisis. The housing bubble had burst. Home prices were down a lot. I had my first child that year. That changed a lot of things for me. So before that, I was 100% all in on work. I'm like, I am going to work all the time. I'm going to make a lot of money. That was my motivation, my drive, how I like to spend time. Then I have my daughter, and it was like, whoa, like everything changed. I'm like, there's this little girl, and I love her so much, and I want to be with her. And, we'd gone through the financial crisis, which was a really tough period, investment wise. And, our funds had done really poorly. Bill had this great track record. He was, a genius, the smartest guy I knew. He worked all the time, read a lot. And at that time, I was thinking, do I really want to sign up for a career where you can be the smartest person and work all the time, like the hardest worker, and still be able to have a period of, such negative performance? And at the time, I would have said, like, you kind of fail for a little while in your job. I've stopped thinking of it in that way. And then I have this daughter, and I was like, so I was thinking a lot of things about, do I really want this? Is there another path in my life that I want to consider? So I grew up in Vermont. This Vermont Inn came on the market. My family had known that one of my ideas was like to become an innkeeper, which in hindsight is so funny because there's no career that suits me less than being an innkeeper. Like, I am like, give me a spreadsheet, give me a stock, give me an analysis, and I'll crush it. Like, socializing with inn guests and cleaning the inn. This is my romantic vision. Oh, I can hold my daughter on my hip and like vacuum the floors, which I don't even enjoy vacuuming. So I'm not sure why I ever had that thought. But anyways, there was this auction for this inn, and I did the analysis and came up with my view, because that's, what I do. And I came up with my view on what I thought it was worth. And so we go to this auction. We're like, we'll go because it's the sign of the times. Me and my husband went. I'll see how these auctions work, these real estate auctions. And we went there. There was an initial starting bid someone else made. Then there was a second bid. I raised my hand and made that bid. And then I immediately thought, what are you doing? And then that was it. The auction was done. We were the winners of this inn. And we had to figure out, I think that was in like September of 2011. And we now had this inn, and we needed to close and figure out what are we going to do with this thing? How do we open this inn and get it running? I made every mistake in the book because I wasn't going to leave my job. That lowered the risk of it. I was going to stay employed, but I had to liquidate a lot of my assets to pay for this thing. And my brother-in-law was interested in running it. So we went into business with family. We did absentee owner, everything they tell you not to do. We did it. We made every mistake in the book. It was a pretty stressful experience. We got it open for Christmas and, the holiday season, which is right close to some ski resorts. So that's an important time. We got it running again. My sister was not happy at the end. That caused some issues there. So we ended up bringing in a professional innkeeper couple to help us with it. And,
wait, pause. How did you find a professional innkeeper couple? Like, what is that? Is it a Craigslist ad? Like, what? Like, where do you find people to do that?
There were innkeeper sites and, specialist organizations. And we did a job post on one of these things and interviewed a number of people. And they were great. They were wonderful. It was losing a lot of money to start. We got it, break even to making a little bit of money and sold it. And, we did pretty well just on the property price from getting all that done. But I realized I was like, that was a really hard way to make money. I'm like, normally I'm sitting at my desk picking stocks. I'll pick it and it can go up and it doesn't take nearly, or it can go down. I can lose money too. But I'm like, it doesn't take nearly the amount of physical, mental, maybe mental effort. You have to do some analysis and monitor it. I'm not on the phone all the time, not dealing with an unhappy sister and brother-in-law. Like, we were on a reality TV show, actually.
Wait, what?
Yes. Hotel Impossible. He really helped us and advised us. So we had some good life experiences with the whole thing, but it was a lot of effort.
And how did you exit the Vermont Inn?
So we sold it to a couple who wanted to retire and do the innkeeper thing themselves, which that is a much better profile for someone who wants to be an inn owner, and they still own it. And, my family still sees them and they've done well with it. And so it truly is a lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's not a scalable business. It's not something you're going to, get really rich on. So, I learned a lot of lessons from that experience.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So you go through this exit. You've now checked off the boxes of being an entrepreneur in a sector that is extremely challenging and difficult. You made all the mistakes in the book. So kudos to you for still, being alive to tell the tales. What happens next in your journey? Are you focused on continuing to build this career path? Are you looking at other kinds of investments? Are you always sort of conservative with how you're looking now at parking your money for it to grow? How is your mindset now shifted, and what does your financial life start to look like after being the owner of the Vermont Inn?
Yes, well, that was a big weight off my shoulders. And so I think I got it sold. And by that point, I had explored a number of other careers. I very quickly realized the innkeeper thing was not ever, a fit for me. And I explored a few other things that were more closely aligned with my profession, like going into, endowment management and those sort of things. And none of it was a great fit. And then I realized I really love what I do. I love analyzing companies, talking to smart CEOs, figuring out, what is the market telling me this business does and what do I think it can do? And I love figuring out the intrinsic value of businesses. So at that time, I'm like, I'm just going to do what I do for a few years. And it was like my first kind of pause, because I'm kind of type A, like, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do next? I'm like, I'm just going to take a few years to do this and be here and enjoy this. And I gave myself 3 years of that. I think I had gotten, another offer and, from one thing that I was exploring, and had gotten a big pay raise out of that through those negotiations and that experience. So that put me in a place where, I felt really great about what I was making. And I was like, I'm just going to be here and enjoy this and do this for 3 years. And if after 3 years, then I'm going to reassess. So that was a great period for me, because I really felt like it was the most peaceful period of truly fully accepting what I was doing and being at peace with it and doing well. And then after, I'm the type of person who maybe struggles to stay in that state for a long time. Also, I had become the co-manager on the mutual fund that I worked on with Bill, somewhere around there. And at the same time, I had started my own fund that was just an internally managed strategy. It's equities, just like we were doing, but I was the sole decision maker on that. And so my idea was, I want to figure out if I can do this equity investing thing on my own, without Phil. I want to prove to myself primarily whether I can do this. And so, by the end of 2019, I had a 5-year track record. It was good. And so I was like, okay, I want to start. I want to start.
Let's go sometime.
Yeah, let's go after. We didn't have an institutional business at that time. We had many years ago, but our firm had undergone a number of changes over the years. And so we didn't have an institutional business. And, institutions said they wanted more women and minority, fund managers, company owners. So I was like, let's go after this market. Let's set up a new entity, Patient Capital. Bill was a minority investor, but it operated jointly with Miller Value, where I was employed at the time. And I said, let me do this, Bill, let me do this, and let me try to build this business. And so again, it was all of my entrepreneurial efforts have been somewhat lower risk by like structuring or having something else that I'm doing. So not all this new thing where you're not making money and spending money.
I love that. It's so calculated, Sam. You're quite methodical at how you roll these things out. So talk to me, as your career is building, you're obviously a mom, right? You are in a relationship. Money conversations are not just around stock picking anymore. It's also around building and creating a life together and sort of what that looks like for shared values. And so can you share with me a little bit about how some of the internal conversations at home have been around money? Where are there opportunities to, are you guys always on the same page and sort of seeing eye to eye? Are there ways of sort of negotiating around values? How has it been at home with respect to money?
It's funny because opposites attract, right? I mean, that's just how things work. So me and my husband are pretty different. He mostly leaves the money stuff to me. Like that's my specialty. He would say, maybe that's not his area of expertise. He likes to spend more freely than I do. We've tried various things actually at one point. So he stayed home for a year after we had my third child. And I thought, okay, this is great. But he hated that. That just was not for him. He wanted to go out and be active. So, we quickly discarded with that. We mostly have the same broad values, I think, when it comes to money. We both grew up in Vermont. We both didn't have a lot of money. We talk a lot about how do we instill the values we want in our children, because we both had, more serious financial constraints on us, which were helpful in some regards as growing up, at least we thought, in instilling the values. And my kids don't necessarily have that same forced constraint. So we talk a lot about how do you instill those values in your children? How do you
instill the values?
I mean, I think we have a lot of conversations about it. I think we try to have them do some chores. My oldest she just turned 13. That's in Maryland, you need to be 13 to babysit. So now she's interested in getting babysitting experience. I think having to do the whole earning, saving, spending, budgeting thing is a really helpful lesson for kids. I think it's harder to get, that for kids these days sometimes, just given society. I mean, when I was 12, I was walking from school to the neighbor, to the house and babysitting and doing it all on my own. And that was not illegal at all. And it was totally acceptable. Now there's laws in Maryland against doing that sort of thing. And there's all sorts of activities. I think I'm a long-term investor in markets. So I have conversations with kids. We went to Disney World and a little over a year ago and for a family vacation. And one of my colleagues had told me, you need to do this VIP thing. You get to cut all the lines. This had come up at the dinner table. And I was like, I think the cost was high. It was like $10,000 or something dollars to do this. Insane. And I was like, what? And I was like, we had the discussion at the dinner table. And I was like, as a value investor, I'm like, I am absolutely not doing that. That is insane. And my son, he likes everything expensive. I'm like, I've told him, you better get a really high paying job because we go to Turks and Caicos. He decides he wants a house there when he grows up. He follows, these cars and expensive cars. So he's like, Mom, we got to do this VIP thing. And so I did the math on, okay, Leo, I think it was 9 at the time. I'm like, if you invest this in the equity markets, which have over the long term are 10% a year from now until the time you retire, I think it was $2.5 million or something that it would be by the time, this $10,000. I mean, that's stunning. People don't, it's just so much time that you can compound. That's the trick in markets. It's if you're invested for a long time. Now, who knows if they're internalized, you have to know how we're doing it. So I don't want to claim we have all the answers. Ask me in 20 years how we've done. But I think talking about it and having some actually money habits, that's what we're trying to do.
That's so valuable. I mean, it is challenging, right? The children today, their constraints are different and it's by intention, right? It's we've worked so hard to create these environments and opportunities so that they're not stressed out or concerned about money in the same way, but yet you want to instill those same values around drive and satisfaction around your own work and being able to feel like you can do something. And my gosh, the ability to provide for yourself is so satisfying. And that is something that no one can tell you. You really just have to live and experience through that, right? I mean, it's wild.
Yeah, 100%. And, for me, coming from nothing and then having that thought about, if I make $1,000 a week, I will have made it, So then I'm graduating college and I'm there and I'm thinking yes, I am doing it. And it's, it's hard. I'm for I watched some of my friends who came from more and like struggled and were going into advertising and couldn't, it's just like the less you come from, the more you can live with less. And the easier it is to feel like you're making progress. And so for my children, I'm like, their standards are just going to be higher because they didn't live like that. How do I lower them? Like that, I think it's an open question. I mean, I'm not sure what the answer is.
I mean, it's all going to be played out. I can imagine us having a conversation in 15 years and being like, okay, so what worked? Like what worked? What didn't work? So Sam, as the founder and managing member of Patient Capital, you are charged and responsible for not only running and managing a business, but also creating a vision and legacy and starting to really develop into this body of work that I think is just going to be so incredible as you look back on your life as a young, let's say, 102-year-old woman, as you are starting to think about sort of your championing of women and helping women get into more leadership roles and really providing this this lightning bolt, if you will, of energy. How are you starting to see your values in the world you want to create and also the development of this firm start to really take shape?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think one, it's been really fun, and I feel like it's a creative endeavor to work through this. And I think one really important lesson for me, which I didn't understand early on when I would come up with business ideas, is like, you don't need to have it all figured out day one, right? Like it's an active effort of creation. I feel like you're figuring it out and it's coming alive as you're doing it. And so that is the creative process. That's really fun. That's one of the things I've found the most fulfilling about entrepreneurship is sort of working through all the different ways that you bring this thing to life. And so that's still an active process. I'm very passionate about women investing, women in business. I was at a women's conference, a few months ago talking to women financial advisors. It was amazing. And I think we have so much room for improvement, and we've come so far. My profession, portfolio management, so running of these portfolios, I think I saw we're up to like 12.5% women, but it was 9% a few years ago. So we can do a lot better than 12, but we're moving in the right direction. We have 1.4% of assets managed by women. So that's really, really, really way too low. And there's all these great stories out there. My favorite. So when I'm talking to women, I'm like, you can do this. You got this. Like investing is a thing that anyone can do. And women are actually in some ways better than men at it. Because men are, some of the academic research shows that they're overconfident and they trade too much, which hurts your returns. And women don't do that same thing. I think helping women understand that, that they have some benefits. There was this U.gov study about asking people if they thought they could land an airplane if, it was going down and their only tool was to be on the line with air traffic control. And almost 50% of men were either confident or very confident they could do this. And only 20% of women, the experts said it was nearly impossible. So women were much better calibrated than men to this. But, I always say, like, you want someone to try, because if you're going to go down, like, take the reins, And so I think, just talking and helping women understand that a lot of times I think in investing, it's doing the simple things, but doing them consistently and doing them well over long periods of time is super, super powerful. And I think that women are actually very gifted at that.
How juicy. As you're sort of benchmarking now to the next goals, I mean, Sam, you've accomplished so much and you're still quite young. And so to think about the goals you have coming up, the areas that you want to have impact, or even just, things for your family, obviously there's so many things to be tracking to, and you're clearly a very savvy investor. But as far as other goals in life right now, what is coming up for you next? What are you most excited about?
I mean, there's so many things. I think within the business, within investing, I think we have an interesting opportunity, and I'm really inspired to try to build a company that's the most investor friendly, active management? So like, how can we just do everything that's in the best interest of investors, like fully align ourselves for that? Sometimes Wall Street gets a really bad rap for financial engineering for their own value extraction. And I think sometimes they get that reputation for a good reason. I think the idea of really building a trusted company that investors 100% have confidence in will do, what's right for them. That is really appealing to me. I think my life has been most transformed by changing how I think about the world and my mind. So some principles from Stoicism and Buddhism, I've gotten into studying those. I think they're transformative. So I write a little bit about that. And I think figuring out how I can integrate, it seems like there's business over here and that, sort of stuff on the other side. But I actually think, how do you integrate that? And what does that look like? I think we're very early in sussing that out. It's, kind of the world's moving in that direction, I think, but we're so early in it. So I am very passionate about what does that look like? And it's so helpful. It's so helpful in managing a business. It's so helpful in dealing with all the demand, the more you know about this sort of stuff.
I totally agree with you, Sam. It's so funny. I met my husband over, and we were at an EO conference, and we met over a conversation around spirituality and business. And, when we start to think about these principles that are universal or things that really help to keep us calm, collected, and help us make balanced decisions and be driven by a deeper inner sense, and is so darn applicable in business and investing in really life for the long tail. We plan to be on this planet for some time. We need to start acting like it.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. And it really does. Like when I got in this business 20 years ago, I didn't hear anything about that. Nothing. So I really think we are seeing a shift, and I'm excited about that. I'm excited in partaking in that in whatever way I can.
Wow, I love that, Sam. Okay, so one of my favorite questions to ask is not just how great of an investor you are, but some of your favorite things to spend money on. So please dish it all. Where do you love to spend your money? What are some things that bring you joy when you do spend your money?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that was, it was a more difficult thing for me given my background. But I would say the probably the biggest area where I have joy and I can spend is vacations and like those experiences and with my family. And I've taken my broader family on a number of vacations. We're actually going on one next week. We're going on a cruise on actually Norwegian Cruise Lines, which we're invested in my fund. So I'd love to support our company. So it's like full circle, but we're going on this family cruise. And so those sort of things. And I feel like I can give back to my family by helping them do that sort of thing. And so I think that's my favorite thing.
I love that so much. And then my last question is, outside of investing in Norwegian cruises, which sounds like a good ask, what can we, the audience, do to support the work and the change that you are looking to see in the world? What do you need right now?
Well, I would love if people would follow me on Twitter or on X if they're on it, follow our blog. So we'll publish pieces that help people make good investment decisions. That's an important way that we think we can help, other people do well. So, that website's patientcapitalmanagement.com, and you can follow us there, and that would be amazing.
Fantastic. Sam, you're incredible. I'm grateful to know you. You're such a badass. And my gosh, your career has been so exciting. I hope to take from you today. I'm like, okay, values investing, right? That is going to be my takeaways. I need to do more of that. And also you're deeply inspiring. And so who knows, maybe there'll be an in of my own in the future. But if so, I might do it a little differently.
I wouldn't do that. We can have a nice chat. Thank you so much for inviting me. This was very fun. I love what you're doing, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Getting Rich Together. Please take a minute to subscribe. And if you like this episode, I'd love it if you could share it with a friend who is ready to elevate their financial future. Until next time, let's keep getting rich together.